Right, hello everybody. I'm here today speaking to Pat Hartman, and the title of this presentation is Bad Data is Bad for Business. And the reason I wanted to discuss this with Pat is because she's often on the forum and she recommends that people use the before update event for validating their data. It's always puzzled me. She's a stickler for this. She's always promoting the before update event, and one day I asked her why, and she went through it with me, and I'm asking her now to go through it again so that you can see what she's thinking.
That's not a great question, Tony. And you're right. People come to the forum, and usually what's happened is they've tried to validate data, but it's not working. The bad data is still, they're getting messages, but the bad data is still getting saved, and they don't understand why that's happening. And so the answer in a nutshell is each form has a list of events. Okay, Access is an event-driven program, and the events are hooks, okay, for you to be able to add your code at certain points in the process, because there's a lot of code that runs behind the scene that actually makes the forms work. So one of those events is the forms before update event. And that particular event is the last event that runs before Access saves a record. Now, Access saves a record for a lot of reasons. Access takes it personally that it is not ever going to lose your data. So it saves data whenever it thinks it should, not necessarily when you tell it to. Although if you tell it to save, it will save, but it also assumes certain things. So for example, if you scroll from one record to another, Access assumes you want to save the data on the previous record, not just abandon it, so it saves it. If you click from a main form into a subform, it makes the same assumption. Okay, you can't add a subform record without a main form record, so you must want to save the main form record, so it saves it for you. And there are other situations also. So how do we get control of this? I made a couple of forms here that will give us some examples. Now, as I was making this example, it occurred to me that one of the things that people don't understand is which events run when. So in addition to answering the question about why we want to use the forms before update event for the majority of our validation, this example is going to show you how Access runs form events. So I'm going to choose our example. So we're going to have a different solution, different examples. And for this particular video, what we're going to work on is the forms before update event, because it's the most important event. If you understand how the forms before update event works and learn to control it appropriately, then you're well on your way to never saving a piece of bad data or an empty record again. Okay, how bad can that be? So we're going to open the sample and look what happens. Okay, I'm going to take a diversion here and we're going to go through what happened here. For starting, okay, I put these things in here in inverse event because for later on it'll be easier for us to look at if we look at the most recent event first. But when we open to the form, this is the first event that ran, okay? And this event ran first for the subform, okay? Isn't that odd? Everybody thinks that the main form should load first, but Access loads the subform first. And we can go into reasons why at another time, but just keep in mind, the subform loads first, okay? So the subform opens, then the load event runs, and that loads the data if there's data. The form resizes because I've got that property set to resize, and then the form's current event runs. And then the main form opens again, and it's the same sequence: open, load, resize. And in this case, activate because we're putting focus into the main form because that's where your cursor is going to end up being when we start. Then we get the current event, and then we have a deactivate and an activate event. And I clicked the button, which is why we ended up with these things happening twice. So that's what that was. Okay. So now this little example that we're using is a two-table example, and it's about as simple as we could make it to show how a form with a subform works, which is probably maybe not the majority of your forms, but probably a lot of your forms, close to half of your forms, will be a main form with a subform. So what we're using is, I'm in the US, so we're using state and we're using city. So the first state alphabetically in the United States is Alaska. And I included the population as well so we'd have more data fields to work with. So this is going to show you what events run when we change the data. Okay, so I'm going to empty this log table right now so we can have a clean slate. Okay, and we went back down here. So we activated the form again. When I clicked on the form, the activate happened. Right. So I'm going to change Alaska to misspell its name because I can. Okay, because that's a field.
But nothing happened to the subform because that's because the form was already open, I presume, yeah?
Correct. It's just open. It's just activating. It's giving focus to the main form. It's activating it. Okay.
Yep.
So now the main form is the form that's going to be accepting events rather than this, because this form is in the background now. Okay. And that's kind of important to know. So the form on top is the active form, and that's the one that's going to receive the events. All right.
Yep.
So and to get around this issue of the form being hidden, some people use pop-up forms. I don't like them. And in my applications, I almost never have two forms open just because it causes confusion. For this particular sample, though, I need to have the two forms open because I want you to see what's happening in the background, okay? But we're never updating the event samples, okay? And so that's the kind of the key here. So anyway, so I've changed the name, okay?
Yep. So you're saying that's a data change?
It's a data change. Yep. We're just changing some data. Okay. There's nothing sacrosanct about how Alaska spells its name, and I can change it if I want to. Right? And so I'm going to click into the subform and let's see what events run. Okay. So the first event that ran is the form's dirty event.
Okay. Because you've changed something.
Okay, and the form's dirty event runs. Actually, we didn't see it because I didn't cause this form to be active. Okay, but the form's dirty event actually ran as soon as I typed the first X. So the form dirty event runs as soon as you type a single character anywhere.
I see. Yep.
Okay, and then the form's update event, before update event, ran when I transferred focus from the main form to the subform. Okay, that triggered Access to say, she changed the data in the main form. I better save it, okay, because we don't want to lose it. And so it saved it. And then the form that runs after the before update event is the after update event.
Yep.
So a lot of people make the mistake of putting validation code in the after update event because it sounds logical, I guess.
Well, I must say that's where I usually put it. I mean, like if I was doing a person's date of birth, I would check it in the after update event to make sure they hadn't put the wrong date in, too late a date in.
Well, see, Tony, luckily you're working with a new version of Access, because earlier versions of Access, that would have put the form into a total loop. Because when you dirty the data, okay, in the after update event, you cause the form to have to run the before update event. And then the after update event runs and you dirty the form again. And so now that makes the before update event. So this is what we call a tight loop.
So sorry, I meant the controls after update event. That's what I was thinking.
Okay, well that's still wrong, but it's less wrong, okay?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay. The before update event is the event that has, and the reason, and I'll show you this on a different form, just so we don't have to disturb our state over here. Let's look at this one. I've got all these event procedures here because otherwise you're not going to be able to see the events. So I've got code on every event here. So let's look at the before update event.
So those events, when they're triggered, they fill in that table so we can see what happened. Yep.
Right. So I've got this call function for this function in every one of those events, and the only reason it's there is so that it saves the record. So it calls the event log with the name of the procedure, okay, and that's what generates those records. Okay, but
Yep.
what we're looking at over here is this cancel as integer. This before update event has a cancel. Okay, what that means is you can cancel this event, and I'll show you that when we look at it later. And the reason you would cancel the event is because you found an error. You don't want to save it. But if we look at the after update event, there's no cancel.
I see. Yep.
I can't cancel that event. It's whatever happens in this event, Access is going to think it's done and it's going to move on to whatever else I did. It's not going to stop. So as we look through this later, you'll see that there are several events that have this cancel. Before update confirm, before insert, before update, the double click event. This is now in our control, okay?
Yep.
Okay, so those are the events that you can cancel. Okay, and now in those cases, they stop Access in its tracks. Okay, so they stop Access from proceeding at that point. So that's one of the ways you control it. Okay. Now we've changed the Alaska. It got saved. So now we're going to look at the event that happens if we move from the main form to the subform. Nothing happens because this record isn't dirty. So it doesn't have any need to save.
So what happened there then? So you haven't changed Alaska again, and it doesn't detect you moving into the subform.
Right. So I changed Alaska, okay, and then I clicked out of the form. I didn't click into the subform.
Right.
I clicked out of the form. Clicking out of the form doesn't force Access to save it.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
But it did cause us to see the event on this form. So we saw the form dirtifier. Okay, so now when I click into the subform, Access is going to know to save the record.
Yep.
And so now you see the before update and the after update happen.
Yep.
Okay. So let's see what happens when we generate an error. So this is why I added the population field, because the name field is required. So if I delete it, okay, and move into the subform, I'm going to get an error, okay? And because the name is required at the table level, I'm actually getting this error from Access rather than me, okay? And you can see that because it's coming out of the error event as opposed to my code event, which you'll see later. So this is kind of interesting, okay? All right, so I'm going to hit escape. And that brings back Access, the Alaska. Okay, the escape did the undo, and now the form current record runs again. Okay, because we moved focus to the subform, and then I moved it back to the main form. Okay, when I did that, so a lot of stuff happened in there. All right, so now let's go over here, and we're going to change the population, and I'm going to put a negative number in here because the population isn't a required field. Okay, so I'm going to make the population -2. Okay, which is, we know this is wrong, and Access doesn't care because I haven't tried to save the record yet. So I'm going to move into the subform, and now I'm going to get this. And this event, this message is coming from the forms before update event. Okay, and I'm going to say okay, and if I move again, okay, see focus is here. If I move again, I'm getting the same message. Okay, why? Because the form is still dirty. I didn't undo the change like I did with the Alaska one. Okay, so the form is still dirty, and so I'm going to keep getting that error. It's not going to let me leave that record, okay, unless I either do escape, which returns the previous value, or I fix it.
Ah, I see. Yes. I was going to ask how you get back. So you just press escape. And
Yes, escape. Okay, so I'm going to go back and I'll make the error again.
is there no way for the user to leave that -2 in there?
No, well, no, he can leave it in there. Okay, so he can leave that in there. Okay,
But it never gets saved to the table. That's what I mean.
I'm going to close access. Okay, nope. Can't save a record at this time. So it's not going to stop me from closing access. Okay.
Hmm.
Access events.
So I see what you're saying is you haven't got to worry about the user trying to get around your validation.
You can't get past it.
Right.
Okay.
And that's the problem with complicated validation routines is if you don't cover all the bases, you've up the creek without a paddle.
If you're not using the forms before update event, I can almost certainly break your validation logic somehow usually by doing something stupid. Okay. But I can break it. But I can't break the validation logic if I put it in the right place. Okay, so let's continue on with this. You can't save the record. Okay, so I'm going to say I want to exit the database object anyway. And you'll see Alaska still has the correct population. So even closing the database, okay, doesn't let anybody save the record. They can't get by that. Okay, so let's try it again. And this time I won't delete the events. Okay. So we'll close -2. Error. Okay. Okay. Got an error. We're going to exit anyway. Open the database again. Let's see what happened if we can figure this out. Okay. So the last thing that happened in that form was because we got a before update error. I think what happened is, I think there may also be a validation rule on the table. I'll have to check. And that may be why we got the form error.
And looking at the event ID and the event name, the main form closed first, and then the subform closed afterwards. You think the code would close the subform first, wouldn't you? But it's not.
Right. Right, but it opened the subform first. Remember, it opened the subform first, so it has to close the subform last.
Yep.
Okay, and so that's why that works. So getting through the event. So before it does that, it finds the error. It runs the undo event to undo the change I made. Then it unloads the data. It deactivates the form, and then it loads it, resizes it, activates it, and then it unloads and closes subform in that.
So the load event and the unload event are actually when the form accesses or loses the data it's linked to. Right.
Yep. Let's go back to the validation forms. Well, now we can clear this now that we know what's happened. Control before update event. Okay. And just back to whatever it was. So now if I change it to, we had a new baby born today. Okay. We change that. No problem. Okay. Yep. So let's see. Where are we? Current. Dirty before update, after update, deactivate because I clicked out of it. Okay. And now activate because I'm clicking back into the form. All right. So let's clear this and let's see what happens when we do this. So we're going to search and we're going to go to Connecticut. Okay. So I guess I moved the cursor into the subform. Why we're seeing that event in the subform?
Because the find states requeried the subform and just showed the cities that are in.
Oh, that's right. Yes, thank you, Tony. Thank you. What a good student you are. But you're absolutely right. Okay. When we move to a new state, okay, Access took it upon itself, okay, to requery the subform.
Yeah.
Okay. Otherwise, it would be still showing the cities in Alaska.
Which is what you'd want it to do.
Exactly what you want. Exactly what you want it to do. Okay. And since I hadn't actually looked at this before, when I did this find the state, it just didn't occur to me what was going on. But it makes absolute sense. Okay. So this is like an aha moment. Of course, I knew this. I just didn't think I knew it. But I know it has to do that. Okay. And so now you know that it happens also. So I think part of the benefit for this example will be eventually playing with this so that you can understand what events run when.
Well, it's interesting that the subform load event or unload event didn't do anything. I mean, I know that's when it loads, but why did it just do the current event? Why didn't it do some data events? Does that make sense?
It doesn't. The load event runs once and only once when the forms load. Okay, so it's not going to run again. So there is no other. Well,
so it hasn't changed the data. It's just filtered the data and showing you less data. So the data hasn't changed. There's no loading or unloading of data. It's just made a filtered list, really.
Right. And what we're seeing here is the difference between events that we control, you and me, okay, and events that Access controls. You know that Access did something because you can see the new city name here and the fact that the current event ran, okay, because we've got code in the current event, so that's why we're seeing this, okay? So we know the current event run because we got code there. But we can't see what Access is doing for us, okay? And so to be perfectly honest, what Access is doing for us is when we change the focus for a new record, it's filtering the subform. Okay, it's rerunning the query, but there's no event called rerun the subform query, so I don't have any code in it, so that's not showing up in our list. Doesn't mean it's not happening. Okay, it's just not something I have any control over.
I assume the subform is linked to the main form with the subform subreport control.
Correct. So right. So if we look at the design view, yeah. Okay, we see that we click the event, go to data, and we see they're linked on state ID. Okay.
I'm always going on about the subform subreport control, that little yellow line you're showing around your subform there, because it's something that people don't realize is there. They just assume that the form, what we call a subform, is sat on top of another form, and it isn't. It's actually got this intermediary control, the subform subreport control, which controls the data link between the main form and the subform.
Right. So the only events that the subform control have, okay, are enter and exit.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know when the subform, I can put, if I want, I can put that little log thing in these two events, and that will show the subform's on enter and on exit events. Okay, but if we click here, okay, now we're into the subform. And again, I have all this event code in the subform. Now, I didn't put it in every single event. I only put it in the event that are relevant to forms. These events are events from newer versions of Access that are not forms. They're web pages or some other such thing. Okay, so we're just not interested in those in this discussion. Some other people might be, but none of these things are currently active, so we're just not going to bother with them. But I did put all this event in all these places. So most of them, as it happens, okay, all I have in it are just this call statement. Okay, but since we're here, okay, one of the problems is that we have, and let me show you the problem before I show you the solution. Okay, so we're going to open the form again. All right, and I'm going to go to.
That listed all the events, didn't it, when you did that, I think? Yeah.
Yep, because I should be I'm going to a new record. So again, look at this. It says cities, this says states. I'll tell you how to do that later. So now I'm going to go to a new one. Okay, we're seeing a message here. Please enter a date before trying to enter a city, right? So let's go here and we're going to try to put in something here. Please add a state before entering a city, okay? So the code that's causing this to happen, okay, which is what you want to happen, is the code that's in the before insert event. So we go into the before insert event for the subroutine. It's got the log, so we can log the form itself. Okay, this is what's triggering the error, okay, immediately, rather than waiting for me to type.
And this is the subforms before insert.
This is the subforms, okay?
Yep. Oh yeah, it says across the top there, access training form subform city code. Yeah.
Right. So normally you won't, if you don't have this kind of event in here, you won't get the error, okay? But anyway, so what we're seeing here is there's code in here that's checking to see if the main form state ID is null. And if it is, okay, which it will be if the main form is on a new record, it's telling you please add a state before adding a city. Okay. A city has no meaning. It doesn't live by itself. A city belongs in a state. So it makes no sense for you to just add cities to a table in the city table because they need a parent, and the parent in this case is the state. So it's going to force you to add the state first. Okay, so there we go. Okay, and so the error is going to come up, okay, all right, twice, because this thing runs twice when we're doing the load event. All right?
Yep.
Okay, so let's do it again one more time. Okay, so now we know we're going to get the error, but if I put in a new one, okay, now I go over here, no error, okay, because I added this first. It had a parent to go to.
Oh, I see. That's the problem which often pops up where people want to enter data into a subform before there's data in the main form.
Right, and you can't do that.
No.
Okay, because this is a relational database, and in a relational database where there's a parent and child relationship, the parent has to exist.
You have to have a parent before you have a child.
That's right. Okay.
Wouldn't be fun otherwise, would it?
No, it wouldn't. And then in the case of a state and a city, unless you've got a floating city that can move around the world or exists on a ship that's not tethered someplace, it belongs someplace physical, which is inside a state.
Yep.
Okay, so this is a case of a hierarchical relationship where the city has no meaning unless it's part of a state. And this is a very typical one-to-many relationship. Most of the time in a one-to-many relationship like this, it will be hierarchical, and that means that the parent has to exist, otherwise the child has no meaning. They can't exist.
Yep.
Say something. Okay. All right, folks, I think we've probably spent enough time at this right now. There's a lot to absorb, and you'll have the sample so that you can play with it and watch the events as they unfold yourself. And at some point, we'll probably make another video that shows you how you can actually import your own forms into this database so you can see the events in your own forms or add the code into your database, which might actually end up being easier, okay, for you. But we'll do that in another video. All right, thanks very much. It was great talking to you, Tony, and I really enjoyed this. I hope everybody else enjoys hearing it also. Thanks again. Bye-bye for now.
Yep, thanks, Pat. That's excellent. Hopefully we'll catch up again next week and produce the next video. Cheers.
Okay, excellent.